Good evening. Welcome to the closed session of the Board of Directors of the Kensington Police Protection and Community Services District. I am Board President Rochelle Sharaswat. It is Thursday, April 13th, 2017 at 6:35 p.m., if I can eye the clock. I will now take roll call. Vice President Natoli? Here. Director Hassai? Here. Director Welsh?
Here.
Director Cordova will be joining us for the closed session only. We will now take public comments. As there are none, we will adjourn to closed session.
You mean the closed session by phone, right?
The closed session by phone. What? I'm sorry.
It's okay.
What did I say? All right. Good. Thank you. Good evening and welcome. Before we open the regular session of the KPPCSD Thursday, April 13th meeting, we have, I hope you'll consider it a special treat as I do. I've requested, we have a wonderful, wonderful singer, and since I am not related to him in profiting off his CDs, unlike other presidents, I can freely promote Officer Wilson and his wonderful singing. His CDs will hopefully be available around Kensington. I think they're at the Arlington, if they're not. But Officer Doug Wilson has agreed to sing the national anthem for us tonight. So if we would give a warm welcome for Officer. Thank you.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Is he good? So, thank you again, Officer Wilson. All right, and you're welcome back anytime. Suggestions on the back table for future song selection. So I will call to order the open session of the Kensington Police Protection and Community Services District. It is Thursday, April 13th, 2017 at 7:36 p.m. I am Board President Rochelle Sharaswat, and I will take roll call now. Vice President Hassai? I'm sorry.
Board Member Hassai is here.
Sorry. Vice President Natoli?
We got promoted.
Sorry, I was here. And Director Welsh?
Don't I get a promotion? Here.
We're all presidents here. That's right, I'm sorry. We have nothing to report out from closed session this evening. We will now take public comments. on items not on the agenda?
Mabry Benson here. Is this okay? Okay. I made most of this at the last closed session, but since most of you weren't here, you didn't get to hear it. You are clearly in the process of hiring a general manager. I hope that you are looking for someone with the qualifications and asking how the candidate would handle critical issues facing the district: financing and budget, trimming police costs, contracting, MOU negotiations, staffing, community center and public safety building reconstruction. Your decision will, of course, have to be made after a presentation to the public and subsequent public comment. I hope that we will be presented with options which the public can comment on rather than just a take it or leave it selection. And most importantly, you should present the option or options, hear public comment, then make the final decision at a subsequent meeting. Major issues, which this certainly is, need thoughtful consideration and should not be made in one meeting, particularly when there is no earlier public discussion. Rather, it is critical to have time to mull over the issue. In addition, this allows time to go back to the candidate or candidates to negotiate based upon this public comment. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Carl Kruger. I would like to compliment staff for getting the notes back on the financial statements. I'm always looking forward to this, and then I know that you're aware that there are some issues, and it saves me some highlighters. Thank you.
I don't have a prepared comment on this, but there were two items, well, actually, there are three items on the closed session comment. A is conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, 4 items. B, public employee employment discipline, 4 items. I would be interested to know if they are 4 new items or are they continuation of old items. And I know that there's a limited amount of information that you can give out on closed sessions, but it seems to me the public is deserving to know if each month we've got another 4 sets of things to deal with. And I actually understand the last one, and I don't think you need further clarification. Thank you.
Anthony Knight. I'd like to make a small but rather picky and to me important point. Director Hasai was absent and calling in by phone 2 meetings ago, and I was impressed that on the agenda it said exactly where you were in Arnold at the firehouse there. My understanding is that that's a requirement of the Brown Act, so that if somebody happened to be in Arnold and wanted to go to the meeting and participate, they would know that one of the directors was there and could do that. I am disturbed this evening, and I don't mean to put Director Cordova on the spot, that her address is not listed. Brescia, or however you pronounce it, Italy is a big city, and I would like to see her exact address on here and to know that this was a public place, so that in the unlikely event that a Kensington resident just happened to be in that city on that particular night, or in the middle of the night, or wherever that was, and wanted to participate, that they could do that. So could we please make sure that the full address is down there? Is she currently online? No, so we can't ask her.
Should we?
As I said, this is not an attempt to embarrass her, but just, I think, a proper thing to do.
My name is Gretchen Gilfillan. I've lived in Kensington 59 years. Want to bring up that I prefer having one meeting a month rather than two. Two is really hard to get to, for me anyway. Then I want to encourage everybody to participate in the Friends of the Kensington Library book sale on May 13th, Saturday, from 9 to 3. I expect to see you all there. It's actually 9 to 5. Pardon? 9 to 5. 9 to 5. 9 to 3, 9 to 5. Be there.
All right, thank you. We'll now take board comments. Either of you have board comments? I do.
Not just yet.
Okay,
Depends on what
all
else
right.
is said.
All right, what else? Well, then I'm happy to go first. First, I would like to congratulate my fellow directors. I requested that they hold meetings for all their subcommittees, for all our committees, prior, hopefully quarterly, at least 3 times a year. And thus far, we have had 2 meetings of the Finance Committee, 2 meetings of the Park Planning Commission, a meeting of the Solid Waste Committee, Park Grounds has met, the Technology Committee. So very impressive amount of work that has been completed, and thank you for your commitment. I'd also like to give, am I missing anything?
I just want to say that the Emergency Preparedness Committee has not met, and I will be in touch shortly. I did a little bit of research on the history of emergency preparedness and the particular committee before I called my first meeting, so I'm sorry for the delay.
Oh, well, it wasn't to call you out. You've done a tremendous amount of work in other committees, so thank you very much. With special thanks to the Technology Committee, that A. Stevens Delk and David Bergen have done an exceptional amount of work, as evidenced by a letter in the current agenda, and as we know, we see them every meeting helping us get everyone up to speed on our sound system. So thank you very much. I'll highlight 2 upcoming meetings. This Saturday, we are having a closed session of the board, which Director Hasai will speak about in a few moments. And also, our monthly Finance Committee meeting is on April 26th. And Adam Benson of Public Law Group will be in attendance to discuss some issues surrounding OPEB. Excuse me, I was remiss in not including Director Cordova in our roll call. She is not joining us for open session. Her health prevents her, and we were attempting to get her in closed session, but we had some technical difficulties. She will be participating in closed session on Saturday. Would you like to?
Is remotely participating also?
Remotely participating, excuse me, yes, but only in closed session, so that would not be accessible to any member of the public.
That's the reason that the full address is not indicated on a closed session item. We have been putting a full address on any open session that she has been attending. Just want to clarify that. But I wanted to
Interrupt you. One last thing on my behalf. I'd like to welcome our new General Counsel, Ann Danforth. And so, yes, she has many accomplishments, but was the city attorney in Tiburon for 14 plus years. And closer to 20, okay, I would. So we thank her so very much for joining us, and we look forward to working with you. I'm sorry, Sylvia, please go ahead.
While we don't have anything to report out of closed session from this evening, and we are having another closed session on Saturday, these items, item C for this closed session today and the closed session on Saturday do deal with the general manager process. And so I wanted to give a little bit of an update on that process. I feel like we have been fairly clear as we've been going forward, but I don't think it hurts to continue to communicate. So as you know, we had 3 meetings, I believe at least, of which we discussed the split of the position, and those meetings had the roles and duties of the general manager and the chief of police well enumerated, and now part of our policy and procedure manual. Also, we're working with the consulting group of public law group, public management group, a consultant named Bob Dice, who has been working with us on recruiting candidates for the general manager position. That position description and information on that is publicly available on our website. It has been posted to numerous outlets as part of the recruitment process through the Bay Area News Group, through the California Special District Association, and through a targeted email list of retired city managers. So we have been putting information out there. We did a hard look at about 14 resumes and interviewed 5 candidates, and we are going to be interviewing 2 of those candidates further. So we are moving forward on our hope to get a general manager in at the target date of mid-May. I'd like to put more information out for people since there is some more information we could provide, including a list of the desired skill sets that we are asking for, as well as questions that we used in our first round of interviews, so that if anyone has comments, and folks have been commenting in the public forum up through now, and if folks have any comments based on the additional documents that we'll post on the website, please get in touch with directors, as you always are and always have been. So I want to, we take our responsibility and our responsibility to hire district staff very seriously, and are going through the best process we know how. I know that the hire for interim GM COP Hart was done in a different manner. I believe that the tenor and the feelings in the community were very different at that time. There was a lot of frustration and anger, and I feel like that is not the case right now. So I also know that that public process caused some very qualified candidates to withdraw from the process. It is not the normal standard way to do things professionally when you are hiring this level of a staff person. So there will not be a public gauntlet for this candidate, but I hope that you will continue to trust us that we are asking the right questions, looking for the right qualifications, and are being very ably assisted by our consultant in this matter. I imagine by early next week.
The question was, when will that information be on the website, just for those who can't hear?
And I may ask Lynn to just send it out to everyone who gets our agenda. I have no problem with making it as easily accessible to people. So we'll just push it out, maybe. Is that okay?
And we hope to have Bob Dice here. Unfortunately, he had to have family conflict and couldn't be here this evening, but hopefully at our April 27th meeting, he will be able to discuss the process and speak about his qualifications and how he guided the board and how he worked with the board to find candidates and lead us through the interview process. All right, are there any staff comments?
Actually, could I just, one little thing, I'd like to refine just a little bit what Sylvia said about the process before. I'm not aware of that process actually scaring away any particular candidate. I'm not sure that we know that anyone was. Maybe you do, Michelle.
I do.
But were there actually some who didn't?
Yes, candidates declined to, I spoke with a candidate who dropped out early in the process, and then one, unfortunately, who left the day of our panel discussion and declined to be interviewed.
What I did want to say, though, was I do think that when we go through a process like that, it delays things. It does cut down on the candidates who are willing to participate. We have some, time pressure to get this done. We need a general manager, and I think it is, and these people are looking at other opportunities as well. So if we sit around and try to make a big public event out of this, it is going to reduce the probability of us finding the right candidate. So I support the process we're in right now. And I also want to note that we've had really good consensus in our closed sessions about who is a good candidate and who's not, at least among the four of us. So I'm very heartened by the fact that we all seem to gravitate towards the same kinds of skill sets, communication abilities, and attitudes.
No comments. All right. We'll move on to item 6, the consent calendar. Are there any items that people would like to make public comment on or have pulled from the consent calendar? I'm sorry, D, E as in Edward. And G as in George. All right. Why don't we look at those items if those are, we'll begin with page 33, item E.
Is that all? Nobody else wants to pull an item?
No.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
Jim Watt. For those who don't have an agenda, consent item number E is the budget and the variance in the budget. And the comment that I want to make is that while I agree with Carl that it's nice to get these footnotes in the budget, the first column in that budget all the way through is wrong. The first column in that budget is a repeat of the third column in that budget, and it shouldn't be that. It's supposed to be the amount of increase in that particular month. So in order to figure out what actually happened in the past month, one has to go back to the previous month and do a comparison. So for example, it's very hard to determine from what we have before us where some of the big increases came. Maybe they were explained in the footnote, but yes.
You are right, and I apologize for the mistake. It won't happen again.
Okay. Then with respect to the budget items, I just want to comment, and I'm hopeful that this is not going to continue. I actually thought that Carl would be speaking to this. But in going back and comparing this particular month with the previous month, I see that line item 830, which is legal costs, increased by $31,000 in 1 month. So I'm hoping with our new general counsel that she will not be running up bills of that magnitude. That's basically all I have to say about the budget. I do want to point out, however, as a member of the Finance Committee, that we are currently on track to possibly show a budget surplus here of $200,000 at the current rate that we're going. So I want to point out that will be the third year in a row that we have seen a budget increase. I believe that 3 years ago it was something like 130, as I recall, and last year it was, according to our audit, about 240. So I just want to point out we are building up our reserves. This is something that I have been pushing on for some time, and I'm very pleased to see that that trend appears to be continuing. We're very fortunate that, of course, part of the reason for that is because of the wonderful increases that we're seeing in the levy tax line item in terms of revenue, and also the fact that we have had some reduction in our police costs due to the fact that we are operating with one less officer for a period of time here. Those are my comments on the budget.
Could you wait just one moment? Are you going to move to the next item?
Yes.
I actually have a comment on the budget. On page 34 and 35. This is more of a general comment. I'm just a little concerned, and I want to talk with my fellow directors, that some of the items, so that we can give direction to staff, that some of the items, especially account 562, this is page 35, referring to vehicle maintenance. There's a note from the fleet manager here about staffing levels and developing next year's budget. And while I appreciate the annotations, some of these are, to me, editorializing a little bit, but I think that probably better process, even though I want to say that I read these very closely, is that if we have input from officers or staff that reflect on budgetary matters or policy, that probably it's best not to just include it as a note, but to make sure that a separate email is sent, and to make sure, I hope that you have been alerted, General Manager Hull, but if not, I'm hoping it's not just appearing here, so that we're making sure that we're catching and processing this information accurately, so that we're utilizing everybody's input and from our staff and officers.
Well, I disagree a little bit. I think that's valuable information.
Oh, I don't disagree. I just want to make sure that it doesn't only appear here.
Oh, okay.
I mean, so.
I thought you were saying it was inappropriate for it to appear.
Well, I mean, it somewhat maybe isn't, it might be a personal opinion, and I'm, but.
Well, I just view it as a heads up. Hey, if you return to full staffing, don't forget that that's going to have a wear and tear impact. I think that's.
Oh, no, but it should be, it's implying a difficulty in the future budgets, that an annotation that should be made, and so that, I don't want it to just appear here. So.
Fair enough.
Go ahead.
Okay. Item G is the item that appears with respect to the Solid Waste Committee meeting and some of the items that they discussed at that meeting and some of the action that they wish to take as a result of that. I would just like to add another item to that, if I could. I was pretty heavily involved, as Mr. Welsh may recall, in a discussion of the Bayview contract. And there were a couple of items that I had some issues with, but I did not prevail. And yet there was some merit to the fact, that as Mr. Welsh, who was basically spearheading that particular issue, made to the justification as to what occurred. And what I'm referring to here is the fact that in the Bayview contract that we entered into a year or so ago, we agreed to increase the fee that we were going to collect from 5% to 7%. And we knew at the time that we were obligated to pay 3% to the district. The justification that was given at that time for the additional...
You mean to the county? 3% to the county?
Yes, district, yes, to the county. The additional 4% coming to the district was an increase from 2% in the previous contract. And one of the arguments that was made with respect to that was the fact that, and it was a legitimate argument, that we were going to have to negotiate a new contract with the county. And because that contract with the county requires us to pay them a certain fee, and not knowing what that new fee increase might be, and that is an item on tonight's agenda, there was the concern that we might actually have to increase the 3% fee. Therefore, going from 5 to 7 gave us a cushion in the event that the county was going to ask for more. And I do want to talk to that particular issue later on when we get to that in the agenda. Nevertheless, what has now happened, because it's contained in the agenda package, is that the county has stayed with the 3% fee. And that 3% fee theoretically will remain intact for the duration of that contract, which contract is coterminous with the contract between the district and Bayview Refuse. So what I would like to have Ms. Natali take a look at, or I'll call her Eileen, would be, I believe that it is not necessary under the circumstances for us to continue to charge ratepayers the 4% coming to the district. The reason that I say that, and as I said several years ago, is because my interpretation of franchise fees as it applies under Prop 218 and a couple of others is that a franchise fee kind of falls under the same category as Prop 13, which in effect says that, but with some variations here, that a fee can be charged so long as that fee is used for the specific intent that is involved in the particular issue at hand. Therefore, a fee of an extra couple of percent coming to the district can be used for the district to build up reserves to cover the potential costs of litigation, the potential costs of new contract negotiations, that sort of thing, but only for those purposes. And right now what we have is we have a fee of 4%, which on total revenues by Bayview Refuse of $1.5 million comes to about $60,000 annually. Over a 7 or 8 year contract, you can see that that is going to result in a significant sum of money in our account, which can only be used for Bayview Refuse purposes. And what this does, in my opinion, is it tends to distort, when we're looking at budgets, as we are on the Finance Committee, the amount of money that we really have. Now, I understand that it gets kind of handled as we look at the restricted funds. But what we're seeing here, when I mentioned earlier that we are going to have a potential surplus of $200,000 this year, is that $60,000 of that is actually Bayview Refuse money. But that Bayview Refuse money is for only use for Bayview Refuse purposes. So I would like Eileen, I'm sorry for being so long-winded here, to take a look at the possibility of going back to Bayview Refuse, asking Bayview Refuse if they would consider reducing the fee from the 7% to 5%, maybe in return for not having a rate increase in that year, or some greatly reduced rate increase, something like that. That's all I'm requesting. All right.
Jim, I'm sorry, I missed that last point. Could you repeat it, please? Last 3 sentences.
What I said was maybe Eileen should take a look at, and her committee should take a look at the possibility of going back to Bayview Refuse, because this is allowed under your contract, and asking them to reduce the current 7% fee that they charge us, because it's built into the cost of our cans. And in return for that, as you know, we have theoretically generally a 3% increase every year that follows. Instead of giving us a 3%, maybe they give us a 1% in the next year, something like that.
I'd just like to comment, we could, and Eileen was just asking me about this, we could renegotiate the Bayview contract anytime we want to make that kind of a switch. I think it's premature to do that, frankly, because the county can raise the fee they charge us anytime they want if they document that their costs go up. And their costs may well go up in the future, just looking at the way legislation goes and waste disposal requirements go. So it does behoove us, just as you've sort of suggested in other areas, it does behoove us to accumulate a bit of a reserve, even though this particular reserve has restrictions on its use. But, you know, building a reserve is always a good idea, up to a point, okay?
Yeah, the question is, what is that point? That's the real question, right?
All right. Further comments on the consent calendar? If not, would a board member like to make a motion to adopt the consent calendar?
Move to adopt the consent calendar?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Any opposed? No. Okay, the motion passes 4-0. All right, moving on to item number 7, new business. We're going to have a discussion concerning Wi-Fi policy for this building, and Vice President Natoli will update and inform us about our different possibilities.
Thank you. We have Wi-Fi service here in the community center with Hughes Satellite, and we've been looking at alternates to Hughes Satellite. My understanding is it works fine when the weather is good, like tonight, but it doesn't work so well at other times. And it turns out that AT&T is an alternate, but a more expensive alternate than the current contract with Hughes. I don't remember what the Hughes contract is off the top of my head. It's a couple $100 a month. 182. Thank you, David. I didn't see you there. Yeah, and AT&T was about double that amount, which doesn't seem to make sense, but that's what we've been understanding. So we do have Wi-Fi, and we're going to be testing it. The Wi-Fi code is Kensington CC for Community Center, and we'll be monitoring the use of that over time to see if
Capital,
it's
do
sufficient.
we need capitalization, or we can just caps matter?
I suspect you could do all lowercase and it won't be a problem, but it's Kensington with the capital K. Well, I think sometimes with passwords, if you do lowercase, if it's upper, but anyway, it's Kensington with a capital K and CC, no spaces, capital C, capital C. So we'll be posting signs if people are agreeable to that. And that's one thing that we can, we're seeking community input on. With the password, there's no way to limit the use. If people are downloading a lot of movies at the community center, which is somewhat unlikely, but if they do, we might be using up our monthly allotment early in the month, and then what will happen with the Hughes system is the system goes very slow for any other user at that time. So any input would be?
I have a question. Is the network called KCC Guest?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That password did not work.
It worked for me, so I don't know. Yeah, yeah.
Third time's a charm.
That's right.
Yeah.
So is there the possibility of us changing the password, let's say monthly?
Yes.
So that we can?
Yes.
Okay. And what does the board think, if you buy a muffin, no, like your local coffee shop, but would we want to change the password monthly?
I think the question is this password something we're going to be posting on the bulletin board and making available to anyone who's in the vicinity? Or is it something that is provided for certain events? I mean, those passwords can be changed, so it could be provided for a board meeting, or it can be just available to the community all the time. I don't know what our monthly usage is.
And that's why we're going to be monitoring it.
But do you know what the monthly allotment is?
Was it, David, 5 megabytes or? Yeah,
Approximately 5 megabytes is the monthly allotment
yeah,
per
something like that.
month.
Yeah.
Okay.
That doesn't seem like a lot.
No, it doesn't at all.
This may be something to restrict to board meetings for the time being.
You know, I think we ought to start out conservative with this, and, you know, if things go well, we could think about incrementally expanding.
Well,
Just my thought.
Eileen and I had she was mentioning this for the agenda, and I was wondering whether or not, if we put it on the board, whether those that lead youth groups here would be very excited that the kids had Wi-Fi access during scouting meetings, or, so I thought perhaps that we might want to keep it a little bit more, or children participating in KSEP classes, because so many of them do carry cell phones today, so.
The leaders might like having that available.
That is true. That is true. We could talk about distributing it to KSEP teachers, and perhaps the fly fishermen. We're hoping to have Wi-Fi access for using Square in the building. So if there's a fundraising event, it's always very helpful to have Wi-Fi access. Any public comment? We're welcome to happy to.
I have one question. The satellite transmission issue, how big of a QC issue is that really? Do you have any sense of that, Eileen?
I'm told, and I haven't experienced it directly, but I'm told that in bad weather, it could be a problem. So I would imagine that maybe in the winter and the summer with the fog, it might be a problem. But it is less expensive than AT&T. But AT&T will give you a larger bandwidth than what Hughes will give you.
Thanks.
Well, I think we start this out, would be my preference to begin, and then probably take community input and see what folks are hoping to download, what kind of usage, and if we need to add more, and we find that it's worthwhile to the community, that perhaps then we're moving to AT&T. So, although I'm related to someone who works for them, so I should conflict myself right out of this discussion.
Well, AT&T is the only other game in town, so I was just looking for the AT&T costs. I did have them in here, but.
I believe it
Do
was.
we have a draft
Are there other
policy?
providers besides AT&T?
Um,
Like Comcast?
It's theoretically, but the problem is they need to have a cable line close by.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, we don't want to.
So is there a draft policy that we're considering?
No, it was
Just a discussion?
a discussion, and we could make a proposal for implementation, just because it's an influx, I think. So, would you like to make a motion? Would you like someone to make a motion if there's no public comment? I don't want to keep it.
There's no motion.
I'm going to move that we, right now, keep a limited distribution of the password and see how that works out and see what the usage is over time. In the meantime, we'll continue to explore other options to Hughes.
I'll second that.
All right, all in favor? Aye.
Yes.
Okay, none opposed. The motion passes 4-0. All right, item 7B, we are looking at the amended memorandum of understanding between the KPPCSD and Contra Costa County for meeting the requirements of the California Integrated Waste Management Act of 1989. This is, as you probably have the understanding of, an MOU between the district and the county that gives us certain requirements as to how it fits with our solid waste contract and what fees we must turn over to the county. Word comment? Yeah. All right, this is page 63 of the agenda. So the district, as you, okay. The district currently is paying a franchise fee of 3% of Bayview's gross receipts to the county. And this new proposed MOU does not show an increase in those rates. So if there's no board comment, we're happy to take public comment.
Jim Watt. I always hate to preface my comments about the fact that for 40 years I did contracts almost for a living, so I'm one of those strange people that actually likes looking at this sort of thing. First of all, I would appreciate it, as I've mentioned in previous meetings, if when we have something of this nature, which involves a significant sum of money here, we're talking about paying the county here 3% of $1.5 million, that's $45,000 annually. for the next, until 2023. If we could get just a quick summary as to what it is that, that this contract, why we're doing this contract, the background of the contract, and then the economic costs of it. It mentions the 3%, but 3% to the average person here doesn't mean anything. It really has to be translated into dollars. So I would appreciate it if we could kind of get just a brief overview on anything that is coming up for final approval. With respect to the contract itself, I would like, and I don't know if our counsel has a copy of the contract in front of her, but I have the MOU, yeah. Excuse me, I call it the contract. On page 2 of that MOU, item K, it says the 1997 MOU is scheduled to expire on September 1 of 2016. It has obviously expired, and I think we should say that it has expired. And with that, and by the way, that kind of brings up something that bothered me when I saw this, because I can remember back around that time when Chief Hart was telling us about the fact that, oh, gee, we need to get on this contract and get it reinstated. Gee, well, he was the general manager, and how could he possibly spend more than 10% of his time on general manager duties? Well, here's something that obviously fell through the cracks, because here we are almost 6 months later, and we are finally getting this contract reinstated. So I just want to point out, it has actually expired, and by virtue of the fact that it has expired, in my opinion, this is not an amendment to a contract. I do amendments all the time. Amendments are changes to an existing contract. This is a new contract, and I think that I would prefer to see that word amendment deleted. I'm troubled by the fact that we get a contract in the agenda package, and on page 65 of the agenda, but page 3 of that contract, at the very bottom there in item 2.4.2, it refers to Exhibit B, a very important exhibit, but there's no Exhibit B attached in the agenda package. I would love to have seen what that Exhibit B contains, because that Exhibit B contains the obligations that we are required to submit to the county to make sure that we are fulfilling the county's obligations to the state to handle recyclable materials, all that sort of thing. So again, I have no idea what attachment B is. I didn't see it in the agenda, okay. All right, just want to point out that without that, it's a little late now to take a look at it. The next thing I'd like to point out is that on page 70 of the of this MOU, it's page 8 of the MOU, it talks about the term of this contract. It says in item 3.1, it says the term of the contract is from September 1, 2016, that's okay, even though it will be entered into far after that date, and expire on August 31, 2023. But then down in item 3.3, it seems as though this is contradictory. It says that this amended MOU shall automatically terminate 1 year after the termination of the franchise agreement unless the district enters into a new franchise agreement that provides for the effective implementation of these obligations. So it just seems to me like there's some sort of contradiction there, that on one it's a very specific term and on the other it could be extended. I just wanted to point out that it's something that would kind of trouble me as a person that reads this stuff. But probably the thing that I think is most important that I would like to encourage you to consider is that in the previous contract, by the way, the previous contract that we entered into was in 1997, and it ran for 19 years, all right? In the previous contract, there was I have it here. There was a 5.8 in that previous contract which talks about Bayview Refuse. It says, this MOU grants rights to and imposes obligations on Bayview. By its execution of this MOU, Bayview acknowledges and agrees to comply with and be bound by each and every term, condition, or provision of the MOU applicable to Bayview. And Bayview is a signatory to this document. And I think you need to have Bayview as a signatory to this document. There are a number of things here, as I saw, because I didn't get the Exhibit B, but in the previous document, it had these exhibits. There are a lot of things that you have to comply with. I have the feeling, and Lynn could probably answer that heretofore there's probably been very little information going back to the county on a quarterly basis. Am I probably correct on this in terms of our compliance with this contract?
Specifically, what information?
Well, in the contract signed in 1997, just as in this contract, there are obligations for you on a quarterly basis to
Diversion rates.
submit various,
Yeah, okay, may I answer?
yeah. Mhm.
Okay, so under the previous agreement with Bayview Refuse sent that information directly to the county on our
Okay.
behalf.
Okay. So you're, okay, so.
Let me say something here. There is a perfectly fine relationship between Bayview and the county, and now thankfully between us and Bayview. So all this reporting stuff, if the county wants something, they go to Bayview. If Bayview needs something from us in order to get that to the county, they call in. Everything is working fine.
Right.
frankly.
Okay,
It hasn't always been that way in the past.
I understand that,
Well,
right.
no.
Right. Nevertheless, I think they should be a signatory to this document, that's all, just,
I should say one other thing. The Bayview contract itself talks about them complying with county obligations. We had a little meeting with the county on this, and they agreed Bayview doesn't need to sign this, just for your
all right,
information.
okay. The last thing that I'd like to comment on is that, as I mentioned, starting in 1997, we have been contributing 3% to the county. In today's dollars, that amounts to $45,000. I'm not too sure how that number was derived. We had a discussion here earlier about whether or not the county could increase that. If you look at the way in which the language talks about the fact that this 3% will be applied, it's extremely confusing as to how they would ever justify changing this thing one way or the other. And in all likelihood, it's very possible that we are probably paying more than the amount of money that we have to pay based upon the costs that they are incurring. But again, maybe for Eileen, when you are looking at this, it's actually the franchise fee, it's 2.8 on pages 68 and then continuing over to page 69. It's extremely confusing as to how that 3% was derived, how that 3% could possibly change in the future.
Well, I don't know that it's confusing. They haven't said how they calculate it, but it's clear they're talking about their administrative costs. And I think what your point is how do we know they're fairly calculating what those administrative costs are? That inquiry could be made. I mean, they've made no secret that they feel this is to pay for their portion of the administrative costs. So if we wanted to dig into that, I'm sure we'd go to the county and they would justify it, or at least we could see how well they justify it.
Well, because as you know, this also allows for the potential reduction in that 3%, should in fact it be the case that we shouldn't be paying them $45,000 annually, that's all. So it might be something that you should probably take a look at, that's all. Thank you.
And let me just clarify, for brevity, we did not put the original Bayview contract adopted in November of 2014 in the agenda, but that contract, which is on our website, contains all the amendments and exhibits listed in this MOU. So I apologize it wasn't in the agenda, but they are at the end of the Bayview contract on the website.
A. Stevens Delk, and I don't have anything prepared now, but a couple things on this contract. One that Jim may not have made perfectly clear. the previous contract with Bayview ended in 2015, and the concurrent one with the county ended 1 year later. And everybody thought, this is really wacko. How in the world did they come up with this? Well, the best I can understand it, the county put in a fail-safe that if the district ended the contract with Bayview, the county had 1 year to collect their money. So I think probably this contract had the same intent put in it, but if Jim says it ends in 2023, that's the same year as Bayview's ends. And I think the county intended, from the language in it, to extend it 1 year beyond that so that they didn't get shortchanged. So that's one point then. The other thing that I want to point out is I've read the contract a couple times, and in there, the 3% franchise fee rate is mentioned, but it is not mentioned when the district has to pay the county that 3%. Last year was the first year of the Bayview contract with the district, which switched from the district paying the county directly to from Bayview paying the county directly to Bayview paying the district. And the district would pay the county any amount of money that was owed. For 1 year, the district did not pay the county anything, as far as I can understand. But in September of 2016, there was a $35,000 reduction in the revenue that the district got from Bayview. $90,000 in revenue from Bayview suddenly went down to 50-some thousand. And I asked about it. I said, what happened to that revenue? How did it disappear? And the explanation that Lynn and the accountant gave was that was money that the district had to send to the county for the Bayview franchise fee. I am amazed that an auditor, an accountant, could say that is a reduction in revenue. The revenue just disappears. It seems to me that that is an expense that the district has to pay. The district will receive about $90,000 from Bayview next year. It will have to pay the county 35, 40, some number like that. That is an expense. It's not like the revenue just disappears. But one thing, again, going back, one thing that isn't in the contract is when do you pay it? Once a year, as was done last year? One of the big changes in the district and the Bayview contract that went into effect 2014, went into effect 2014. Previously, Bayview paid the district every 3 to 5 months, whenever they did the arithmetic on their gross receipts. The last contract with between the district and Bayview said that they would pay every month based on the gross receipts of the previous month.
I believe that General Manager Hull can answer that question for you.
Say that again?
Okay,
Right.
go ahead. I was going to say.
So anyway, that was a change, and if you look at the revenue we get from Bayview, Bayview bills customers 3 times a year. The first month after the bill goes out, about 70% of the people pay for the next 4 months. 15% of the people pay in the second month. Another 10% of the people pay in the third month. And it's in the fourth month that the rest of the people pay, most of the rest of people pay. And I've discussed this with Eileen. Recently, in the middle of March, I got a notice, a second bill from Bayview telling me that my bill was not due until April the 15th, but I got a bill with a second bill with a notice on it telling me that I would owe a $20 late payment fee if that payment wasn't received by the 15th. There's nothing in the contract that says...
Excuse me, you've been up for a long time, and I think that's an issue that should be raised with the subcommittee that's dealing, the Solid Waste Committee. We're talking right now about the MOU with the county, and those are legitimate things to talk about, but I think this is the wrong place and time to do it, frankly.
Sorry about that, folks.
No, thank you. Go ahead. You were going to speak to the...
As far as I want to speak to the payment schedule that we are sending the franchise fee to the county. Bayview is sending us the 7% monthly. And out of that money, we calculate the 3% and then generate a check and forward that check to the county. So the payment fee is monthly.
Thank you. Okay. I would like to make a motion that we authorize Director Natoli to execute this MOU with clarifications. I would like the clarification to talk to Bayview, to the county to ask if they meant this MOU to go to 2024 rather than 2023. I would also like clarification from our attorney concerning item 2.9 on the contract regarding the provision of pickup for the library and the community center, and that we make sure, most currently, to make sure that that we are in legal compliance in requesting that service. And then I put just a suggestion that perhaps our committee looks at hard numbers for reducing franchise fee and how that reflects on ratepayers' bills. But that's just a request for the committee and not an execution of the contract. So
I'll second the motion. I would, however, in relation to the library issue, and in recognition of that wonderful saying by Gertrude Stein, a difference to be a difference must make a difference. I can't imagine that the cost of collecting garbage from the library amounts to much more than a few bucks a year, so we might not want to lose too much sleep over that issue. I know, Ricky, you went over there and were trying to get some idea. I'm sorry, Chief, you went over there trying to get some idea of whether there's any volume of garbage being disposed of there, and you couldn't find a can. So maybe somebody would talk to the library there and ask what their disposal situation is so we could get a handle on that. Okay? Thank you.
Right. That's right.
Could I also just say if there's anything else that was raised in public comment that, I know you were taking notes, and if you found anything else that is of concern, that you are, with Eileen, are free to, comment and negotiate on those items.
I will work directly with Vice President on that.
Thank you.
All right. I made a motion, you seconded the motion. All in favor?
Yes?
Aye. No opposed? Okay, the motion passes. All right. So I will make a motion to adjourn.
I will second that motion.
All in favor?
Yes.
Aye. Good evening. Thank you so much for coming. We hope to see you on the 27th, 26th. 26th for finance.
Or if she's going to walk